Before I ever learned what wealth, success, or safety felt like, I learned the language of struggle. I didn't grow up around manicured lawns, smiling neighbors, or front porch lemonade stands. My childhood unfolded inside the cracked sidewalks of East Baltimore, where laughter echoed fewer times than sirens, and where most children grew up fast, not tall. My name is Janelle, and from as early as I could remember, life didn't feel like a beginning. It felt like I was already halfway through a storm with no umbrella. Every morning started with the distant echo of traffic, a leaking kitchen faucet dripping like stubborn tears, and the cold feeling of uncertainty pressing on my chest. Our apartment sat on the third floor of an old brick building that seemed tired of standing. Paint peeled off the walls like they were trying to escape the reality we lived in. The halls smelled of cigarette smoke combined with yesterday's meals from other units. I used to imagine what it felt like to wake up anywhere else. Kids at school joked, argued, and planned weekend hangouts, but I stayed quiet. Not because I had nothing to say, but because exposing parts of my life felt like handing someone a loaded weapon. Silence became my safest friend. My mother, Sharon, once worked as a nursing assistant. She was the type of woman who smiled even when she was hurting, the kind who apologized if someone stepped on her foot, and who always kissed my forehead like it could protect me from everything she couldn't control. She was mom by love, not convenience. But life has a way of bending even the strongest souls. Years of exhaustion, double shifts, cheap food, and untreated chest pains caught up with her. When she collapsed at work, everything changed. Suddenly, she wasn't the provider wearing scrubs. She became a patient fighting to breathe without gasping, praying her heart wouldn't quit before hope found us. When other families argued about which vacation spot to travel to, we argued with utility companies begging for a few more days. Every bill was a villain in an invisible horror movie. The lights flickered often, but somehow Mom convinced herself that it was just the neighborhood wiring. I knew better. Food wasn't selected, it was whatever we could afford. Sometimes ramen noodles filled the pot, sometimes cereal without milk, sometimes nothing. I pretended I wasn't hungry so she could eat, and she pretended she was full so I wouldn't worry. Love can starve, but it never complains. Despite everything, she tried to make home feel safe. She taped inspirational quotes on the fridge, bought scented candles from dollar bins, and played old R&B songs just loud enough to mask her coughing fits at night. I heard them anyway. School didn't make things easier. My shoes had creases so deep they looked permanently folded. My backpack zipper no longer closed fully, and my coat had a tear at the sleeve I covered using my palm whenever teachers walked by. I avoided conversations about weekend plans, favorite restaurants, or holidays because the answers would expose us. Most of my classmates came from families who filled refrigerators weekly. I came from a home where the only thing filled regularly was anxiety. But the hardest part wasn't the hunger, the broken walls, or the sleepless nights listening for Mom's breathing. It was feeling invisible in a world filled with people who could see. Sometimes I'd sit by the small bedroom window watching the city lights flicker in the distance, wondering if people across town even knew children like me existed. Children who learned responsibility before childhood, who tucked themselves in at night because no one else physically could, who whispered prayers hoping they were heard. The neighborhood outside reminded me daily how fragile security was. Police cars rolled by like taxis, corner arguments escalated into violent threats, and most dreams felt like smoke, visible for a moment, then gone. Kids either tried to escape through education, sports, or art, or they surrendered to the streets. I wanted to escape, but survival left no room for dreams. Survival was the dream. Mom always reminded me, life doesn't ask if you're ready, it just happens. The trick is not letting it change your heart. She meant well. She wanted strength to be my armor, not bitterness. But pain doesn't ask permission to enter either. It settles quietly like dust you eventually stop noticing. The winter before everything changed was colder than usual. Our heater barely worked, so we hung blankets over the doors to trap whatever warmth we could. Mom wrapped a scarf around her neck inside the house, calling it cozy fashion, pretending it was intentional. She coughed more that month. Her medicine bottles emptied faster than she could refill them, and I watched her hands shake when she tried to stand. I was afraid, but fear became such a common feeling that it blended into daily life like background noise. One night, I found her sitting at the edge of her bed staring at her palms as though she was searching for answers written in her lifelines. I approached quietly and sat beside her. She smiled without showing teeth, a familiar sad smile, and whispered, "You're stronger than I ever was, baby." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to be strong. But strength without choice feels like punishment. She told me stories from when she was younger, full of ambition, talent, and dreams she once believed were reachable. Back then, she had no idea life would ask her to trade hope for responsibility. I wondered if all adults were unfinished versions of who they once wanted to be. Still, she never spoke hate into our situation. She never blamed anyone. She chose dignity even when life stripped her of everything else. Looking back, I realize our home carried something that many wealthier homes didn't. Unbreakable love inside unbearable circumstances. But even love has limits when health fades, money disappears, and time runs out. And slowly, time began running out faster than either of us expected. Something was coming. Something that would flip my world upside down and drag me into a future I did not see approaching. A future waiting right outside our door, even though I had no idea it was already on its way. Most people assume sickness arrives loudly, but in our home, it crept in slowly, like a shadow that grew longer each day. Mom didn't want sickness to look like defeat. She tied her hair neatly every morning, painted a thin line of eyeliner even when her hands trembled, and insisted she was just tired. But no makeup could hide the fading glow in her eyes or the way her breathing changed from soft exhales to shallow gasps. After she left her job at the clinic, life tightened around us like a noose. Disability benefits were still processing, the kind of word officials tossed around without ever realizing real lives were waiting behind it. Every denial letter came with polite language, but the message always felt the same: "We don't see your struggle." Mom tried to stay productive, insisting we maintain routines. She woke me every morning for school, prepared something small before I left. Sometimes a slice of toast, sometimes nothing but warm water meant to trick our stomachs. She didn't want pity, not even from me. She hid her symptoms like a secret she feared could destroy both of us. Her coughing became more frequent. Not the quiet kind someone clears casually, but deep, rattling sounds that shook her body. I remember listening from my bedroom at night, fighting the urge to run to her. Fear taught me something dangerous. When pain becomes daily, you learn to stay still even when everything inside you is screaming. One night during winter, I found her sitting in the living room surrounded by medical bills, inhaler refills, and letters from assistants' offices. The only light in the room came from a weak lamp that flickered occasionally, making her silhouette look like it was fading from reality itself. She didn't hear me walk in, so I stood silently, watching her chest rise and fall with visible effort. She pressed her hand against her heart like she was reminding it to keep going. Then she placed her palm over a small photo frame on the coffee table and closed her eyes. I couldn't see the picture clearly from where I stood, but I could see her shoulders trembling, not from cold but from a memory she couldn't escape. I whispered, "Mom?" She looked up quickly, forcing a smile as if she had been caught doing something wrong. "Thought you were asleep," she said, trying to hide the stack of bills with the side of her arm. "I was, but I heard you." She paused, then sighed, her voice soft but heavy. "Sometimes adults cry too, sweetheart. It doesn't mean we're weak. It means we're trying." I walked closer, staring at the photo she tried covering. It showed her standing near a tall college campus building, wearing a smile full of dreams. I had never seen her that young, that energetic. Something about that version of her felt so distant, like a story I was never allowed to read. "Was that before you had me?" I asked carefully. She nodded slowly. "A long time ago. Back when I believed the world would bend if I asked it to." There was a silence that didn't hurt but felt meaningful, as if words might break something fragile. After a moment, she reached up and stroked my cheek. "You're the best part of my story," she whispered, trying her best to sound confident. But her voice cracked just a little, and I felt it. The next few weeks became a cycle. She slept more, moved slower, and needed my help with simple tasks, though she never directly asked. The fridge stayed almost empty, but she insisted she wasn't hungry, claiming she'd already eaten something earlier. I knew that was her way of making sure I didn't feel guilty for eating the little we had. School didn't offer relief. Teachers saw me as quiet, focused, maybe shy. They didn't see the anxiety tucked behind my eyes or the mental clock counting down unknown hours. Every morning I left home scared I might not return to the version of my mother I knew the day before. One afternoon, I stayed behind after school to finish homework because the classroom felt more comfortable than going home to silence. As I packed my bag, my teacher, Miss Parker, walked over. "I've noticed you seem distracted lately," she said gently. My body stiffened. Adults always asked questions right when I'd mastered holding myself together. "I'm okay," I answered, looking away. Her expression softened, the kind adults wear when they want to help but don't know how. "If you ever need someone to talk to, my door is open." Kindness threatened tears more than cruelty ever could, so I nodded quickly and left. The temperature outside was below freezing that evening. The wind cut through my thin coat while people hurried past me on the sidewalk. I envied anyone with a warm place waiting for them. When I reached home, I hesitated before unlocking the door. I never knew what version of reality I'd walk into. Inside, the lights were off except for the kitchen stove light. Mom sat at the table wearing her robe, head leaning on her hand, eyes half closed. I rushed toward her. "Mom? You okay?" She lifted her face slowly and forced a smile that didn't make it beyond her mouth. "Just resting my eyes," she whispered. I noticed her chest rising unevenly. Her breathing had changed again. "I think you need to go back to the doctor," I said. "We can't. Not until my insurance clears." "But what if something happens?" She shook her head softly. "Nothing's going to happen. I just need more rest." I didn't believe her, but arguing felt like kicking a wounded bird. That night, as I lay in bed with my blanket pulled up to my chin, I listened again. Her coughing echoed through the thin hallway. I stared at the ceiling waiting for it to stop, praying it would stop because she was better, not because she couldn't cough anymore. The coughing continued longer than usual, then slowed, then stopped altogether. For several minutes there was nothing, not even a shift in the mattress or a faint sound of movement. That silence wasn't peaceful. It was terrifying. I sat up quickly, my heart racing, convinced something terrible had happened. I whispered into the darkness, "Mom?" No answer. The snow outside the hospital windows fell like tiny silent confessions, each flake drifting slowly, as if afraid of touching the ground without permission. Inside the pediatric ward, the lights were dim, machines hummed gently, and tired nurses moved like ghosts through corridors that had witnessed more tears than laughter. It was here, in room 214, where 8-year-old Harper Lee Daniels sat beside her unconscious mother, her legs pulled against her chest, her dry lips trembling from hours of crying. Her tiny palm pressed against the blanket, hoping warmth alone would heal the person she loved most in the world. Her mother, Jasmine, hadn't moved since the emergency surgery hours earlier. The doctor said her heart was unstable. They used words Harper didn't understand: cardiac trauma, internal complications, next 48 hours are critical. All she knew was that the strongest woman she had ever known no longer opened her eyes. Harper could hear the echo of her mother's last words before collapsing that morning. "Baby, no matter what happens, remember, love is louder than pain." Those words terrified her now. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand and took a quiet breath, trying not to cry too loudly. She was afraid that if she cried too much, God might think she didn't have faith. She didn't want him to think she was angry. She needed him more than ever. On the bedside table sat a half-empty apple juice box, a children's Bible, and a drawing Harper had made hours earlier. A picture of her and her mom holding hands under a rainbow with the words, "It's still us." Not was, but is. Even in fear, Harper fought for hope. Daniel Reed's expensive Italian shoes clicked softly against the polished hospital floor. His suit looked out of place, a custom navy blend that belonged at a Wall Street board meeting, not inside a children's hospital where hope often cost more than money could pay. He had intended to speak with the hospital director about future donations and renovations under his foundation. That was the plan, logical, efficient, and emotionally detached, just like every other decision he made. But something shifted inside him the moment he walked past room 214. A sound he recognized all too well. A child trying not to break. He froze. He shouldn't care. He wasn't here for personal involvement. But his feet moved toward the doorway anyway, drawn by something invisible yet undeniable. Through the half-open door, he saw Harper resting her forehead against her mother's hand, whispering through choked tears. "Mommy, please don't go where I can't follow." The sentence sliced through him like glass. It felt like hearing his younger self. He stepped inside slowly, praying she wouldn't notice him. But she did. Her eyes, red and swollen, met his with a questioning fear that made his chest tighten. "Sir, are you one of the doctors?" she asked. "No," he whispered, voice softer than he intended. "Just someone passing through. I heard you talking. I'm sorry if I intruded." She hesitated, looking him over, confused by how sad his eyes looked for someone who didn't belong to her world. He cleared his throat and gestured toward the empty chair beside her. "May I sit?" he asked. She nodded. What happened next felt like an invisible rope pulling two strangers toward a moment neither of them would ever forget. They sat in silence at first. Daniel waited, not sure if he should speak. Harper slowly wiped her face again and whispered, "My mom is sleeping, but not like normal sleeping. They said she might not wake up. I don't know what to do anymore." Tears returned. Her voice cracked, but she refused to break into loud sobs. She was trying so hard to be strong. Daniel felt his throat tighten painfully, memories of another hospital room, another girl, another goodbye, something he still refused to discuss with anyone. He leaned forward slightly. "Your mother looks strong. Don't lose hope." It was the only sentence he could form without his voice collapsing. Harper stared at him. "You talk like you know how it feels." He swallowed hard. "I do." He didn't say more, but she didn't push. She could sense that his hurt was buried too deep to touch casually. Minutes passed. The room was so quiet that the steady beep of the heart monitor sounded like a countdown. Then she looked up again. "Sir, what's your name?" He hesitated, not because he didn't want to tell her, but because he feared what the name Daniel Reed represented in the world. To many he was an untouchable billionaire. To her he didn't want to be that. "I'm Daniel," he whispered, not using his last name. She nodded, then offered shyly, "I'm Harper." A tiny spark of courage returned to her voice. A nurse entered briefly, checking vitals, adjusting wires, writing notes, then walking away with a tired sigh. When the door clicked shut, Harper leaned toward Daniel, her voice barely above breath. "Even when she wakes up, we don't have anywhere to live anymore." Daniel's brows pulled together. "What do you mean?" Harper looked down, fingers twisting nervously. 2 weeks ago, we had to leave our place. Mom lost her job after getting sick too many times. We've been staying in shelters and sometimes in the bus station. She kept saying things would get better. But they didn't." Her lips shook. "She tried to pretend everything was okay because she didn't want me to be scared, but I heard her crying when she thought I was asleep." Daniel closed his eyes for a second, fighting the heaviness in his chest. No child should have to say such words. Harper continued, "I tried to be brave for her. I told her that when I grow up, I'll buy her a big house with a pink door." She laughed and said pink doors are for fairy tales, but I told her that's exactly why we needed one. A tiny smile cracked through her sadness. Then her voice lowered again. "But now I don't know if she'll ever see it." Her voice broke completely and she covered her face. Daniel moved very slowly, giving her time to refuse, but she didn't. He placed his hand gently on her shoulder. Something inside him, a wall he spent decades building, began to crumble. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't asking for rescue. She just wanted her mother back. And that was the one thing he couldn't guarantee. Harper suddenly turned toward him, tears shining under the pale hospital light. With the smallest voice and the biggest fear, she whispered, "Mr. Daniel, do you think God listens faster to people who are rich?" Her question hit him like thunder. He didn't know whether to answer with truth or with hope. And for the first time in years, Daniel Reed, the man who believed money solved everything, could not find an answer. The night dragged on like time had forgotten how to move. The snow outside thickened, turning the parking lot into a white graveyard of silent cars. Inside room 214 the air felt colder, heavier, like the fluorescent lights themselves were mourning. Daniel stayed longer than he planned, unable to tear himself away. Something about this little girl's world felt painfully familiar, like she was walking through the same darkness he once did, barefoot, with no one holding a lamp. Harper sat hunched beside her mother, clutching the hem of the hospital blanket with both hands. Her breathing grew uneven, not the calm breathing of a child who was simply sad, but the gasping kind of breathing that comes from fear that has lived inside for too long. Daniel leaned forward, speaking softly. "Can I ask something, Harper? Only if you want to answer." She nodded slowly, eyes still glued to her mother. He swallowed. "Was this the first time your mother collapsed?" Her lips pressed together, as if the truth burned. After a long pause, she whispered, "No, it's been happening for months." His heart sank, but she wasn't finished. But she didn't want anyone to know. She said if people found out, somebody might take me away. Those words struck him harder than he expected, because he knew that fear too well. Harper wiped her nose with her sleeve and took a shaky breath. She kept saying, "Once I get better, everything will change." She always said that. She hesitated, then turned her head and whispered as if confessing a crime. "There were nights we slept behind the grocery store near Jefferson Avenue. When it rained, we used cardboard." She wrapped me inside her coat so at least one of us stayed warm. Daniel felt a sting behind his eyes, a sensation he had spent years choking away. "How long were you without a place to stay?" Harper looked down, voice fading. "Since last fall. We were asked to leave our last apartment. Mom couldn't pay the rent. When she tried to go back to work, she fainted again. After that, everything got worse." Her voice trembled to a whisper. "She stopped eating full meals and pretended she wasn't hungry. She said she preferred snacks, but I knew. She wanted me to have whatever food we found. There is a kind of pain created by hunger that never leaves the memory." Daniel recognized it. Harper inhaled shakily, clutching her knees tighter. "Sometimes," her voice cracked, "Mom would say she could hear people judging us even when they didn't speak. She was scared someone would think she was unfit. She said some people don't understand that illness and failure are not the same thing." Daniel nodded, struggling to breathe through the tightening in his throat. But there was something Harper still hadn't said. He could feel it. He waited, silently, offering her the safety of his stillness. Finally, she whispered, "We didn't come here the regular way." Daniel's brows drew together. "What do you mean?" She kept her eyes fixed on her shoes. "She was too scared to take me through the emergency entrance. So she waited until the guards were busy dealing with another case, then she pushed me through the doors first and whispered, 'Go. Don't stop. Someone will help you.' She forced herself to pretend she was okay just long enough to reach the reception desk. Her voice broke. And then, she fell. Tears rolled freely now, but she didn't cover her face this time. She needed someone to finally see her pain. Daniel leaned back in his chair, his jaw tightening, his eyes growing hotter, not from pity but from a familiar, bitter rage. This world had rules, rules written by people who never knew what it felt like to count breaths instead of blessings. He whispered almost without thinking, "You were never supposed to go through this." Harper stared at him, not asking for comfort or promises, just desperate for someone to acknowledge the brutality of life, without sugarcoating or pretending. Daniel rubbed his forehead, feeling the emotional walls he'd built for years beginning to crumble under the weight of a little girl's honesty. He had seen children suffer. He had funded shelters and programs. He had written checks and shaken hands. But he had never sat in the middle of it while it was still burning. And now, he couldn't just walk away. "Harper," he said quietly, "before your mother collapsed today, was there anything unusual? Something she said or something that happened?" She hesitated, then nodded. "We were walking near the downtown bus station. A storm was coming and she didn't want us to sleep outside again. She tried calling someone for help, someone she said owed her one last favor." Daniel leaned in. "What happened?" Harper swallowed, her voice shaking. She made the call, but whoever it was picked up, listened, and then hung up without saying a word. Daniel felt heat rising under his skin, anger flavored with confusion. Did she say who she called? Harper nodded softly. She said his name. I remember because she said it twice. Daniel's pulse slowed. What name? Harper lifted her eyes, the innocence in them mixing painfully with knowledge no child should carry. She called him Mr. Reed. The world around Daniel froze. No movement. No sound. No breath. Harper continued, unaware of the explosion her words triggered. She said he was the only person left who once promised her something real, and that if he didn't help, nobody else would. She paused, then whispered, but he never called back. Daniel felt the room spin. Memories he had locked away began pounding like fists on a door. He stood up slowly, gripping the back of the chair as if he were suddenly weaker than the child before him. Harper noticed. Her voice lowered with confusion. Mr. Daniel, are you okay? Daniel turned his face slightly away, hiding eyes that were no longer steady. Because only one person in his life had ever accused him of breaking a promise that mattered. And he had spent years convincing himself she'd moved on. Daniel whispered, not to Harper, not to the room, but to a memory. It can't be her. Then he stepped out of the room, hands trembling, searching for something, or someone, he never expected to find again. Daniel walked down the hallway as if the ground itself had tilted underneath him. His heartbeat was no longer steady, it punched against his ribs like it wanted answers he wasn't ready to give. He stopped near the vending machines and braced his hand against the wall, trying to breathe. How could this be happening? He came to this hospital for business and donations, not to reopen buried wounds. But life never asked permission before breaking people. He closed his eyes and the thunder of old memories started forcing their way back. Memories wrapped in a voice he once swore he would never forget. A woman with a laugh that made stress disappear. A woman who saw him as human long before he became untouchable. A woman who once whispered, "If everyone leaves, I'll still stay." Her name, Jasmine Turner. And he had ruined everything between them the night he chose power over love, success over loyalty. He never imagined she'd end up here. Not alone. Not like this. And certainly not with a child who looked at him with the same quiet hurt he once carried. The question slammed into him. Could Harper be his? He shook that thought away instantly. Reality was already suffocating and he couldn't afford delusion. But the timing, the connection, the silence, the whispered name, it all lined up too cleanly to ignore. A middle-aged nurse named Sandra approached, carrying a clipboard against her chest. Her presence was calm, motherly, and observant, the type of person who noticed more than she asked. "Sir," she said softly, "I saw you sitting with the girl. She doesn't usually talk that much. She must trust you." Daniel forced a contained breath. "She shouldn't trust me. I don't know if I deserve it." Sandra looked at him carefully. She's been through more than most adults can imagine. A child like that, their instincts get sharper. If she leaned toward you instead of away, you should pay attention. He hesitated, then asked quietly, "How long have they been here?" "Only since this afternoon," Sandra answered. Her mother collapsed outside near the parking lot. Security rushed her in. Daniel closed his eyes, imagining the scene. Rain, cold pavement, panic, a child screaming for help. Sandra continued gently. "She hasn't regained consciousness, but she's fighting. And that little girl, she hasn't left her side once." Daniel nodded slowly, his voice barely steady. "She said they'd been homeless for months." Sandra's expression darkened. "Yes. And there are signs they were avoiding shelters and officials. Probably afraid of being separated." Daniel rubbed his forehead, guilt crawling under his skin. He whispered, "I should have found her sooner." Sandra studied him with quiet intuition. "You speak like you know her mother personally." He didn't respond, but his silence answered. Harper sat exactly where he left her, because children who live in survival mode don't move unless necessary. She had been quietly tracing shapes on her mother's arm with her finger, almost like drawing imaginary stars, hoping one would wake her. When Daniel walked in, she looked up quickly, panic flickering behind her eyes. "You came back?" she asked, almost in disbelief. Daniel sat down again, slower this time. "I'm not going anywhere." Those words hit Harper so deeply that she didn't know how to respond. She simply stared, breathing through the shock of hearing something she hadn't heard in months, the promise of presence. Daniel glanced at Jasmine. The years had changed her, not in beauty but in battle. The world had taken too much from her, yet he could still see the woman he once knew. He reached out, touching the side of the bed, not her, respect mixed with fear. "Harper," he started quietly, "you said your mom called someone named Mr. Reed, the person she said promised her something." She nodded. "Do you know anything else about him?" he asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "Mom said he was her biggest mistake, and also the only man she ever truly trusted." The sentence hit him like a knife. He swallowed hard. "Did she ever show you a picture of him?" Harper shook her head. "No. But she said if I ever met him, I would know, because my heart would feel different." Daniel froze. Harper turned toward him slowly, her voice fragile, scared to be wrong. "Mr. Daniel, why do your eyes look like you already know him?" The world seemed to stop. Daniel looked away, unable to hide the pain. Then Harper asked the question he never expected yet somehow always feared. "Are you him?" Silence filled every corner of the room, not empty silence, but the kind that changes destinies. Daniel didn't answer. He couldn't. Not yet. The door opened, a doctor with a worn expression entered. Harper immediately stood, clenching her hands. The doctor spoke calmly but seriously. "Her condition is critical. We found signs of untreated heart complications that have been progressing for quite some time. We'll continue aggressive treatment, but we may need to discuss potential next steps if she doesn't respond." Harper's knees wobbled, and Daniel caught her before she fell. The doctor continued, "Also, we need to locate her emergency contact or next of kin. Without that, certain decisions become complicated." Harper looked up, terrified. "I'm all she has." The doctor exhaled, heartbroken but bound by protocol. Daniel stepped forward before Harper could crumble further. "I will handle her paperwork." The doctor nodded, unaware of the storm beneath the words. When the doctor left, Harper looked up again, voice trembling. "Mr. Daniel, if my mom doesn't wake up, will they take me away again?" He stared at her, and his voice, though quiet, carried a promise he had never spoken before. "Not if I can stop it." Harper blinked, the first spark of hope flickering. Then she whispered the sentence that shattered what was left of his emotional armor. "Then, please don't disappear like everyone else." Daniel looked down at the child who might be his, and silently swore that this time he wouldn't run. The night settled deeper into the hospital like it wanted to stay forever. The hallway lights dimmed, machines beeped steadily, and a cold hush filled the entire floor, the kind that reminded people that life could change silently without asking. Harper curled herself into the chair, clutching her small backpack against her chest as if everything she owned lived inside it, because it truly did. Daniel sat near the window, staring at the snow-covered parking lot, trying to assemble broken memories that refused to stay buried. He hadn't spoken much since promising she wouldn't be taken away. Harper, noticing his silence, whispered, "Mr. Daniel, you're thinking really hard." He turned, offering a faint, tired smile. "There's a lot I should have thought about sooner." She didn't understand, but she nodded anyway. He needed air, not to escape but to breathe without guilt suffocating him. "I'll be right outside the door," he said gently. "You won't leave the building?" she asked immediately. "No. I'm still here." She relaxed a little. When he stepped into the hallway, he leaned against the wall, letting years of suppressed regret press against him. He couldn't ignore the truth anymore. He needed to confront it, even if it shattered him. He closed his eyes, and suddenly he was 26 again, standing in a cramped coffee shop in Brooklyn, long before the world knew his name. Back then he wasn't wealthy. He wasn't famous. He wasn't hardened. He was simply a young man fighting to outrun his past. She was behind the counter, Jasmine Turner, with warm eyes that saw through his defenses without even trying. She gave customers exactly what she gave strangers: kindness that wasn't forced and smiles she didn't charge for. He remembered her laughing because he didn't know how to drink coffee properly. He'd always ordered it black because he couldn't afford cream and sugar growing up, and the habit stuck out of survival, not preference. She slid a different drink across the counter and said, "This is what life tastes like when you stop expecting bitterness." They became inseparable, two wounded souls who finally felt safe with someone. One late night, when rent was overdue and future was uncertain, she held his face and whispered, "You're going to change the world someday, but please, don't let the climb erase your heart." He had promised her, "I won't lose myself." But success demands sacrifices, and he sacrificed the wrong thing. Daniel opened his eyes, feeling something inside his chest twist sharply. He returned to the room and paused. Harper had fallen asleep, her backpack still clutched, her head leaning against the mattress near her mother's hand. She looked peaceful, but not in the way normal children slept. Her sleep looked trained, like survival, not rest. Daniel approached the side of the bed slowly and looked at Jasmine again. He hadn't allowed himself to really see her yet. Her hair was thinner, her breathing uneven, her skin paler than he remembered, but her face, even weakened by battle, still held the same shape that once felt like home. He whispered, barely audible, "If you can hear me, I'm sorry." Whether he was apologizing for leaving, for becoming unreachable, for not looking sooner, or for not knowing Harper existed, he didn't even know. But the room seemed to absorb his words like it understood. Before he could continue, a soft voice spoke from behind him. "You knew her, didn't you?" He turned. It was Nurse Sandra, arms crossed gently, not in judgment but in understanding. He nodded once. She lowered her voice. "She mentioned someone once, years ago, someone who changed her life but disappeared. She said she hoped one day he'd remember her name." Daniel's throat felt tight enough to choke speech. Sandra studied him quietly. "You're not here by accident. Life doesn't do coincidences with stories like this." He sighed, defeated. "I thought she was better off without me. I was wrong." Sandra nodded slowly. "And what about the child?" He turned toward Harper, asleep. "She might be mine," he whispered. Sandra didn't look shocked, only sad that such a revelation came in a hospital at midnight instead of a living room full of joy. "What do you plan to do?" she asked softly. Daniel stared at Harper, this fragile, brave child who had already suffered more than his entire corporate empire could measure. "I won't abandon her," he said. But Sandra wasn't finished. "There's something you need to know before you make promises." He tensed. "What is it?" She exhaled, choosing her words carefully. "When her mother was brought in, we had to review her previous medical notes from other clinics. Some records hinted that she reached out for assistance months ago, and someone high-profile was contacted but didn't respond." Daniel closed his eyes, her call, the silence, the unanswered ring. Sandra continued quietly, "And whatever was said, it hurt her more than the illness." Silence fell, and the truth inside it was brutal. A soft rustle cut through the stillness. Harper woke suddenly, confused for a moment. Her eyes darted toward the door, searching for Daniel. He stepped closer immediately. "I'm right here." She exhaled, not like a child with relief, but like a person who had been holding breath too long. Her voice cracked with fear that never left her fully. "I had a dream that someone took me away and nobody stopped them." Daniel knelt to eye level. "That won't happen." She nodded slowly, then unzipped her backpack, pulling something out. A folded paper, worn, wrinkled, and saved like treasure. She handed it to him. "This is the only picture I have of my mom from before she got sick." He opened it carefully. The photo showed Jasmine, younger, smiling, standing under a carnival sign. But there was more. Next to her, half cut off but unmistakable, it was him. His arm around her. His smile. His past staring back at him. Harper didn't notice the color drain from his face. She only whispered, "Mom said the man next to her was the person who changed everything." Daniel's voice trembled. "She kept this picture?" Harper nodded. "She said one day I would understand where I came from." Then she looked at him with slow, dawning realization. a realization too big for an 8-year-old heart. "Mr. Daniel, is that you?" His breath shook. His eyes filled. And he couldn't lie. "Not anymore," he whispered, voice cracking. "Yes, Harper. That's me." Her eyes widened, not with joy, but with the silent, fragile question. "Then why weren't you there?" And before he could answer, a loud alarm began blaring from her mother's monitor. Rain hammered against the small apartment window like impatient fingers demanding to be let in. The weak bulb flickered above the kitchen sink, barely illuminating the chipped tiles and dented cabinets. The entire place smelled faintly like old paper and lavender soap, the kind Zoe had used to wash her clothes by hand because they couldn't afford the laundry machines downstairs. Daniel sat on the old plaid couch, trying not to look shocked, trying not to stare, trying not to comment on how impossibly small the apartment was compared to the world he lived in. If he reached his arm out, he could nearly touch the front door. If he stretched his leg, he'd be close to the microwave stand. He had hotel bathrooms bigger than this entire space. Zoe stood quietly at the sink, rinsing 2 mismatched cups because there weren't any clean ones left. Crystal stood by the stove stirring a half-eaten pot of instant noodles. They had no groceries. The roasted chicken they pretended to have for dinner 2 nights ago had been nothing but boiled potatoes seasoned with salt and a prayer. Daniel noticed her stirring slower and slower, almost embarrassed that this was all she could offer someone like him. He gently stepped forward. "You don't have to cook anything," he said softly. "I'm fine." Crystal stopped stirring, but she didn't look up. "You're a guest," she replied quietly. "We may not have much, but I'm still a mother. A mother does what she can." The silence afterward was heavier than grief. Zoe suddenly sat across from Daniel, leaning forward, curious. "Can I ask you something, sir?" she said with that same trembling mix of innocence and hurt. He nodded. "Do you have everything you want?" she whispered. The question pierced him. Not what do you do? Not how rich are you? Not where do you live? But do you have everything you want? He opened his mouth, and for once in his life he didn't know the answer. He could buy anything, fly anywhere, silence anyone, but right now, staring at her big worried eyes, all he could say was, "No." Zoe looked strangely relieved, as though she finally found someone who understood what it felt like to be incomplete. Crystal finally turned around, gripping the side of the counter for balance. "Life doesn't give you everything," she said quietly, "but it gives you chances disguised as people." Daniel heard the meaning beneath her words. It was meant for him, and he knew it. Zoe sat on the floor and pulled out a brown shoebox covered in stickers and faded marker drawings. She opened it carefully like it contained treasure, because to her, it did. Inside were papers, drawings, and cut-out pictures of happy families. Families smiling at parks, beaches, Christmas dinners, and school graduations. "I collect what I want but don't have," she explained shyly. Daniel's throat tightened. "Do you wish for a father?" he asked gently. She looked him straight in the eye. "No. I wish my mom never cried again." Crystal's hand froze behind her. Daniel lowered his gaze. Zoe was not searching for wealth. Zoe was fighting loneliness. For a brief moment, they all laughed about a ripped drawing where Zoe had attempted to draw a millionaire mansion with glitter glue. Daniel joked that she made it look like a gigantic glitter marshmallow, and Zoe burst out laughing until she nearly fell over. It was the first time laughter existed inside that apartment in weeks. But happiness is fragile. Too fragile. Because suddenly, there was a soft, creeping noise outside the door. Like hesitant footsteps. Like someone trying not to be heard. Zoe froze, her face draining of color. She grabbed Daniel's sleeve tightly. Crystal's breathing changed. Fear entered the room like a cold gust. "Get away from the door," Crystal whispered sharply. Zoe scrambled backward. Daniel straightened. "Who is it?" Crystal didn't answer. Instead, she walked quietly to the window, lifting one finger to the glass curtain. Her hands trembled as she peeked through a tiny opening. Her body went rigid. She stepped back immediately, covering her mouth with her trembling hand. Zoe whispered, "Mom, who is it?" Crystal didn't blink. Her pulse was visible in her neck. Her voice came out cracked and terrified. "He found us." Zoe began to cry silently, clutching Daniel's arm like her life depended on it. Daniel didn't move, but his eyes sharpened like steel. "Crystal," he whispered firmly. "Who found you?" She finally looked at him, tears reflecting the dim ceiling light. "Zoe's father." Daniel's heart dropped. But Crystal wasn't finished. "He doesn't want custody. He wants control." Her next words almost stopped Daniel's breathing. "And if he sees you here, he'll think I told you everything." Outside, the footsteps stopped. Right outside the door. Someone's shadow slowly darkened the small crack under it. A single, slow, deliberate knock. Zoe buried her face in Daniel's side, trembling. Crystal silently mouthed, "Don't make a sound." The knock came again. But this time the voice followed. A calm, chilling, masculine voice. "Open the door, Crystal." The small apartment fell into a suffocating silence. Only the sound of rain tapping against the window dared to move. Crystal stood frozen near the sink, her hands gripping the edge of the counter until her knuckles turned pale white. Zoe hid her face against Daniel's side, her small fingers digging into his sleeve like she feared he would disappear if she blinked. But Daniel didn't flinch. For the first time in years, he felt something that no boardroom, no press conference, no corporate empire could ever give him. A reason to protect. The knock came again, but this time the voice was colder, sharper, calculated. "Crystal, I know you're in there. Don't make this difficult." Crystal closed her eyes. Tears slid down her cheeks, but she didn't sob. She didn't allow herself to make a sound. She had lived through this fear before. She knew silence could be the difference between safety and chaos. Daniel leaned closer to her, whispering so low not even the walls could hear. "What does he want?" Crystal barely breathed as she answered. "He wants control over Zoe. Not love. Not responsibility. Just power." Daniel's eyes sharpened, silently absorbing every word. Outside, the unknown figure rattled the metal doorknob, slow, testing, like he enjoyed the reaction he imagined happening inside. "I saw your lights on. Open this door." Zoe trembled harder, her tears silently pooling onto Daniel's sleeve. He gently placed his hand on her shoulder, not to hush her, but to tell her without words, "I'm not going anywhere." The doorknob twisted again. Crystal rushed to turn the lights off, plunging the apartment into darkness. Only the faint street lamps outside leaked through the curtains, creating long, eerie shadows across the walls. For a moment everything stopped. The footsteps began moving, but not away from the door. They slowly crept along the hallway like someone checking windows, listening, studying the apartment like prey. Zoe whispered, voice trembling, "Why is he doing this?" Crystal knelt down beside her, holding her close. "Because he hates losing," she whispered. "And he thinks people are possessions." Daniel inhaled sharply, realizing this wasn't just a bad relationship. This was a man trained in manipulation and intimidation. A man who believed fear was the strongest language. But then something strange happened. The footsteps suddenly stopped. No more rattling. No more knocking. No shadow under the door. Silence returned, but a terrifying kind. Zoe looked up, voice shaking. "Did he leave?" Crystal didn't move. "He never leaves without a message." Seconds later, a folded note slid under the door. Zoe gasped and covered her mouth. Daniel walked forward before Crystal could stop him and picked it up, unfolding it near the faint light leaking from the street outside. Crystal whispered fearfully, "Don't read it out loud." But he did. "You can run from me, but not from what belongs to me." Signed with 2 initials. Not a name. Not a threat. A claim. Daniel lowered the note slowly. Crystal buried her face in her hands, fighting back a breakdown. Zoe whispered, barely audible, "Are we going to lose everything again?" Daniel crouched down so they were eye level, his voice steady. "You're not alone anymore." Those words pierced Crystal deeper than any insult or threat she'd ever received. No one had ever said that and meant it. After several minutes of silence and fear-filled listening, Daniel finally spoke with quiet authority. "He's testing you. He wants to know if you're scared enough to run. We won't give him an answer tonight. But tomorrow, we take action." Crystal stared at him like he was speaking an impossible language. "What action?" she whispered with disbelief. "We can't call anyone. He has people everywhere. The last time I tried to report him, the officer said he knew him personally." Daniel's jaw clenched. Connections. Money. Influence. This wasn't just a dangerous man. This was a man who never expected consequences. And Daniel knew people like that. He had sat at tables with men who believed the world belonged to them. He sighed, realizing the next move wasn't simple, it was strategic. "I know someone," he finally said. "A woman who handles private cases off record. She owes me a favor." Crystal looked shocked. "Why would you do that for us?" she whispered. Daniel looked at Zoe, then at the old shoebox filled with families she wished she belonged to. "Because I know what it feels like to grow up without someone willing to fight for you." Zoe slowly reached out and wrapped her tiny arms around his torso. It wasn't a question. It wasn't fear. It was trust. A kind he hadn't felt in decades. Crystal stood quietly, emotion building in her chest. "Thank you," she whispered, voice breaking. "I never asked for help because I thought no one would care." Daniel shook his head softly. "Sometimes life sends people right when you need them, not when you expect them." Hours passed. Zoe eventually fell asleep against Daniel's side, exhausted. Crystal sat across from them, watching with eyes full of confusion, gratitude, and fear, mixed with something else she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Daniel carried Zoe gently to her small mattress on the floor, covering her with the thin blanket she clung to. The child didn't even stir. She trusted him enough to sleep. Crystal whispered, "You're different from him. The way you talk to her, the way she looks at you." Daniel paused, resting on one knee beside Zoe. "I don't know what this is yet," he admitted emotionally, "but she deserves safety, and you deserve peace." Crystal wiped her tears quietly. And then with a trembling voice, she asked a question that would change everything. "Why were you really on that street the night she found you?" Daniel turned slowly. His expression changed. Something deep, personal, and guarded flashed in his eyes. And he whispered, "Because I had just lost someone too." Crystal froze. "Who?" she asked. Daniel swallowed hard. "My mother." The room grew heavier after Daniel whispered those words, as if the air itself paused to respect the weight of them. Crystal stood still, unsure if she should speak, comfort him, or give him space. She had assumed he was just a wealthy stranger with a complicated business life, but grief lived in his voice, the kind of grief that reshaped people. Daniel rose slowly and moved toward the window, staring through the thin curtain into the empty street below. His eyes looked distant, like a man watching ghosts only he could see. Crystal spoke quietly, almost afraid her voice would break the moment. "What happened to her?" Daniel didn't turn. His jaw tightened first, then his breathing deepened. "She died 4 days before Zoe found me," he said, voice low. "I left the hospital, drove without a direction, and ended up on that sidewalk near the bus stop, not because I was lost, but because I didn't know who I was without her." Crystal's eyes softened, sorrow reflecting her expression. Daniel continued, this time slower, revealing each memory like a fresh wound. "She raised me alone. No father. No siblings. She worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. She didn't buy herself clothes for almost 10 years, yet she made sure I looked like the son of a king." He exhaled shakily. "When I finally made my first million, I bought her a house. But she kept living in her old apartment instead. She said a home isn't measured by square footage, it's measured by peace." A tear slipped down Crystal's cheek as she whispered, "She sounds like the kind of woman every child deserves." Daniel finally turned, eyes red but steady. "She was. And I never realized time was running out." Crystal slowly approached him, not touching, but standing close enough to show presence. "You tried," she whispered. Daniel shook his head. "I got so busy building an empire that I forgot to check if she was lonely. I thought success was measured by what I gave her, but all she wanted was me." Crystal placed her hand over her heart, understanding more than she wished she did. "That's why you didn't look surprised when Zoe said she collected what she wanted but didn't have," she said softly. Daniel nodded, swallowing emotion. She reminded me of myself at that age, except she's even stronger. The room slowly warmed with fragile empathy. For the first time, Crystal no longer saw Daniel as a visitor, but as broken in his own way. Not ruined, just reshaped by events he never planned. Daniel sat back down at the small dining table, wiping his face gently with his palm. His voice regained firmness. We can't wait for him to come back. We prepare. Crystal nodded, though fear still lingered. What should we do first? She asked. Daniel leaned forward, organizing his thoughts. Tomorrow morning we leave early. I don't want him following or watching. I'll contact the investigator I mentioned. Her name is Renee Dalton. She handles deep background cases, deals with people who hide influence behind intimidation. Crystal's eyes widened. She sounds expensive. She is, Daniel replied calmly. But that's not your concern. Crystal lowered her gaze, overwhelmed by the idea that someone was finally willing to use power for her rather than against her. But before we talk to Renee, Daniel continued, I need to know everything. No more secrets. Whatever happened, whatever record he has, whatever lie he told, I need it all. Crystal inhaled sharply, hesitating. Can we talk when Zoe's asleep? I don't want her hearing any of it. Daniel nodded. Zoe was still asleep, curled like a small question mark beneath her blanket, so Crystal grabbed a chair and sat across from him, fingers interlocked tightly. Her voice shook at first. Years ago, he wasn't like this. He was charming, successful, confident, well-connected, and he said all the things a lonely heart wants to hear. Daniel listened without blinking. But it changed when I got pregnant. He became controlling. Every call, every outing, every friend was a threat to him. When Zoe was born, he barely looked at her. She wasn't a daughter to him, she was proof I would never leave. Daniel's breathing deepened. And when I decided to walk away, he said I would regret it. Crystal's hands trembled, but she continued. He never hit me with his hands, Daniel. He hit me with fear. He hit me with silence, reputation, and connections. He once told me that what people believe is stronger than what truth can prove. Daniel leaned back slowly, processing. And that's why reporting him didn't work, he concluded. Crystal nodded. He walked into the station smiling. He shook hands with the sergeant, asked about his golf match, then turned toward me and whispered, See how small your world is? Daniel clenched his jaw again, the same expression he wore in boardrooms when someone underestimated him. I've worked with men like him, he said. Men who think they're untouchable. But the difference between power and control is that power stands even when challenged. Control collapses the moment someone pushes back. Crystal whispered, But he doesn't collapse, Daniel. He destroys. Daniel slowly leaned forward, his voice quiet but fierce. Then he hasn't met me yet. A small moment of silence passed between them, not fear-filled this time, but awakening. Crystal finally saw the possibility of a different life. Daniel finally saw a purpose beyond himself. And Zoe, though asleep, would someday learn that the night everything felt hopeless was the night everything changed. Crystal glanced toward the window cautiously. Do you think he's still out there watching? Daniel looked calmly determined. No. But he's planning his next move. And so are we. Crystal nodded slowly, absorbing strength she didn't know she had. What if he tries again tonight? She whispered. Daniel stood, walked to the door, and engaged the additional security chain. Then he'll find out something he never expected, he said. Crystal raised her eyebrows, uncertain. Daniel turned back with a steady expression. That you're not fighting alone anymore. Crystal exhaled deeply, relief loosening her shoulders for the first time in hours. She whispered, I wish I had met someone like you years ago. Daniel gave a half smile. I think I was meant to meet you now, when it matters. But just as the room felt safe enough to breathe, Daniel's phone, face down on the table, lit up with an incoming anonymous text. He turned it over. Crystal noticed his expression freeze. What is it? She asked. Daniel slowly rotated the screen toward her. She looks safer with you than she ever did with me. Enjoy it while it lasts. The message arrived at 3:17 a.m. Someone was watching. Someone new. And they were close. The anonymous message on Daniel's phone sat like a silent threat on the dimly lit table. No typing dots, no second text, just those chilling words and the timestamp that suggested someone was very close while they slept. Daniel didn't reply. He turned the phone face down, looked toward the sleeping child, then at Crystal's frightened eyes. "Don't panic," he whispered. "Fear makes people predictable, and predictable people make easy targets. We'll move at sunrise." Crystal nodded, though her hands trembled. They both silently agreed not to tell Zoe, not yet. She deserved at least a few more hours of peace. As the night faded into early dawn, the rain stopped, leaving the streets outside wet and glistening like mirrors reflecting broken dreams. Zoe woke up slowly, stretching under her blanket, unaware that danger had texted them in the dark. "Good morning," she whispered softly. Crystal forced a smile, brushing Zoe's cheek. "Morning, sweetheart. We're going somewhere today, okay?" Zoe looked surprised. "Where?" Daniel stepped forward, tying the laces of his shoes. "Somewhere safe," he replied gently. Zoe paused, reading between the lines with instinct rather than knowledge. She nodded quietly and began putting on her shoes without another question, a child used to adapting quickly. They left the apartment just after sunrise, using the stairwell instead of the elevator. Daniel insisted they ride in his vehicle rather than call anything traceable. The tinted SUV parked outside looked nothing like the tiny life they had walked out of. Zoe sat in the back seat, forehead against the window, watching the world pass by, storefronts opening, delivery trucks unloading, joggers breathing morning air like life was normal. Crystal sat beside her, hands folded tightly on her lap, trying not to shake. Daniel drove with purpose but not recklessly. His jaw was set. His eyes stayed on the road, scanning every mirror, every turn, every unfamiliar car. After several minutes, Zoe finally spoke. "Are we running away?" Crystal inhaled sharply. Daniel didn't answer immediately, not because he didn't know, but because he needed the right words. He finally said, "We're not running, we're getting ready to fight." Zoe stared straight ahead, her voice tiny. "Is he coming back?" Daniel glanced at her through the mirror. "Not if I have anything to say about it." They turned onto a quiet downtown street in Hartford, where the city noise was replaced by the low hum of serious business. Law firms, private clinics, and consulting firms with dark glass windows. Daniel parked in front of a building with no public sign, no directory, the kind of place only certain people knew existed. Zoe squeezed Crystal's hand tightly. Crystal whispered, "It's okay. We're together." Inside, the front desk attendant didn't ask for ID or reason for visit. She simply looked at Daniel, recognized him, and said, "You're early. She's expecting you." Zoe's eyes widened. She had never seen grown-ups communicate without words like that. They were taken to a small but elegant office where a woman in her mid-40s, dressed in tailored navy, reviewed documents with the calm intensity of someone who saw through lies for a living. Her nameplate read, "Renee Dalton, Private Legal Investigator." She didn't shake hands. She didn't offer small talk. She simply looked at Crystal, then at Zoe, then at Daniel. "Tell me how dangerous he is on a scale from inconvenient to untouchable." Crystal swallowed hard. "Beyond untouchable." Renee nodded once, tapping her pen. "Then I need full honesty. No fear of judgment. No holding back. I can't protect you from what you refuse to reveal." Crystal inhaled deeply. She knew this was the moment she couldn't avoid. But before she could begin, Renee slowly turned her attention toward Zoe. "Sweetheart, I need to speak to your mom privately for a few minutes. Would you like to wait outside? We have coloring books, puzzles, or you can sit with my assistant." Zoe lowered her head. "Can I stay with Daniel instead?" Renee paused, studying the request carefully, then nodded. "Of course." Crystal and Renee stepped into a secondary office, closing the frosted glass door behind them. Daniel sat with Zoe in the waiting lounge, although he could faintly hear the muffled voices. Zoe leaned closer, her voice barely above breath. "Everyone keeps hiding things from me," she whispered. Daniel turned to her gently. "They're not hiding the truth because they don't trust you. They're hiding it because they wish the truth wasn't real." Zoe's chin trembled. Is it my fault we're here? Daniel's heart broke slowly at those words. No, he said immediately, placing his hand lightly over hers. Children don't create danger. Adults do. Tears filled Zoe's eyes, but she didn't cry loudly. She'd learned to cry inwardly. You promise we'll be okay? She whispered. Daniel didn't answer right away, not to avoid truth but to honor it. Finally he said, I promise I'll do everything in my power to protect you. And I don't break promises. Zoe stared at him, searching his eyes for something, and she found it. Sincerity. Meanwhile, behind the frosted door, Renee leaned forward, pen ready. Crystal. I need to start with the question no one likes to answer. Crystal nodded, tense. What does he want with your daughter now? Crystal closed her eyes, voice trembling. He doesn't love her. He doesn't miss her. He wants her because he's afraid she'll one day speak the truth about who he really is. And he wants to control the story before she grows old enough to expose him. Renee wrote rapidly, her expression unreadable. Then she asked, Is there anything at all, that gives him legal leverage? Crystal hesitated, too long. Renee stopped writing. What is it? Crystal finally whispered the explosive truth. He paid for her birth, every hospital bill, every document. He made me sign something years ago. I didn't understand what it was. Renee froze. Crystal, what did you sign? Crystal whispered. A parental rights agreement. Renee's eyes widened, the first time her composure cracked. You signed partial custody without legal counsel, she said, voice tense. He can use that, and twist it. Crystal broke into tears, shaking. I thought he loved us back then. Renee closed her notebook slowly. Well, it's time we give him a reason to regret underestimating you. While Crystal was breaking down to Renee, Zoe sat with Daniel drawing quietly on a piece of paper. She was sketching a picture of 3 people holding hands, Daniel, her, and Crystal, standing under a house with a bright sun over them. Daniel watched quietly, touched. But as Zoe reached into the coloring tray, a small folded piece of paper fell from her jacket pocket. Daniel picked it up gently. Zoe, what's this? She looked terrified immediately. You weren't supposed to see that? Daniel unfolded it carefully. It wasn't a drawing. It wasn't homework. It was a note written in uneven handwriting. And it said, If something happens to Mommy, I'll go with him so he won't hurt her. Please don't tell her. Daniel felt his chest tighten, not with fear but with heartbreak and rage. That note meant Zoe had been planning to sacrifice herself. He looked at her slowly. Zoe, why would you write this? She finally cried, openly, uncontrollably. Because I'm the reason she's in danger, and I can't watch her hurt anymore. Daniel gently lifted her chin so she looked into his eyes. Listen to me carefully, Zoe. You are not the danger, you are the reason we fight. At that moment, Renee and Crystal stepped out of the office, unaware of what had just been revealed. But Daniel wasn't the same anymore. He stood up slowly, fire in his eyes. And with calm, controlled power, he said, So, tell me everything we need to do. Because this ends now. New York City was glowing like a field of glittering dreams the night Harper and Ray arrived. The chill wind swept through the streets, carrying the echoes of taxi horns, distant music, and the restless heartbeat of ambition. For many, New York was a place for reinvention. Fresh identity, new destiny, quiet redemption hidden behind tall buildings. But for Harper, it wasn't just a new city. It was a battlefield where she would have to fight for the truth, for her mother's dignity, and for the fragile hope she still carried in her heart. Ray had arranged for them to stay in a modest but clean 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, far from the skyscrapers and luxury hotels he normally occupied. Harper noticed this. He was trying not to draw attention, or maybe he was trying to protect her privacy before anything exploded. She didn't ask. The silent tension between them was still tender, almost too delicate to poke at. On the first night, she couldn't sleep. Ray sat at the small dinner table, flipping through old files and documents he found in his penthouse after their confrontation. He looked exhausted, like a man wrestling invisible demons, because he was. Harper finally spoke. Ray, He looked up slowly. Do you think anyone in this city knows the truth? Ray rested his hands on the table, palms down as if grounding himself. Harper, this city knows rumors, not truth. My world is built on perfection. One crack and everything turns into a scandal. She slid into the seat across from him. So I'm a scandal? His expression collapsed, almost grief-stricken. No. You are the truth I should have known sooner. They fell silent. The room was small and dimly lit, but its quietness forced closeness neither could avoid. Eventually Harper whispered, "What if your world hates me?" Ray exhaled deeply. "Then I'll leave that world behind." She swallowed hard, stunned, not expecting words like that, not from a billionaire accustomed to power and control. Something inside her shifted. The softness she feared to feel returned, but cautiously, like a wounded animal stepping from shadows. The next morning, Harper was determined. She wanted answers, not money, not pity, not whispers. She wanted the map of her life filled, not with mystery but with proof. She researched hospitals, adoption agencies, private clinics, and non-profit organizations that handled emergency births and confidential cases during the year she was born. She also called former social workers and health centers, but everything felt like pushing through fog. Ray, however, knew something she didn't. People like him didn't lose children by coincidence. If Harper was hidden, someone powerful helped hide her. He stepped out for private calls that morning, calls Harper wasn't allowed to hear yet. 2 days later, Ray told Harper they were meeting with someone. An old friend, a man named Attorney Charles Bennett, once known as one of the most ethical legal advisors for corporate families. Gray-haired, warm-eyed, and calm, he welcomed Harper with a gentle nod. "I heard you're looking for the truth," he said. Harper sat up. "Yes. Do you know something?" He sighed. "I know enough to tell you that your existence was not an accident, nor forgotten." He slid a folder across the table. Harper's heartbeat thundered. Inside were records from a private maternity home in upstate New York, designed decades ago for discrete cases involving wealthy families. Harper saw the year, the location, the notes. Her eyes burned. "There was a woman under strict confidentiality," Charles continued, "and the child from that birth was never registered publicly." Harper gripped the table. "My mother." Ray leaned closer. "So she didn't disappear. She was forced out, wasn't she?" Charles nodded slowly. There was pressure. Someone didn't want that child tied to the family name. A strange tremor ran through the room, anger, grief, and a silent vow blending into one. Then Charles mentioned something that almost stopped Harper's breathing. There was a signature, someone authorizing the private arrangement. "It wasn't your father." Ray's face tightened, his eyes sharpening like cold steel. "Who signed it?" Charles hesitated. "I believe it was a close family member. Someone who wanted to preserve status, reputation, and business alliances." Harper felt her body go cold. So it wasn't fate. It was a choice. The walls of her entire life shook. Someone chose to erase her. Ray stood, pacing, jaw clenched. "If this is true, everything in my family history changes. Our wealth, our legacy, our code of ethics, all built on lies." Harper whispered, voice trembling. "Then we expose it." Charles raised a hand. "You must be careful. Whoever orchestrated this still has power." Harper breathed slowly, deeply. "I didn't come here to destroy anyone. I came for truth, and my mother's name deserves peace." Her strength surprised Charles and Ray. The next day, they traveled upstate to an archive facility that had replaced the old maternity home. The building resembled a converted research center, quiet and sterile. Harper was nervous, but something inside her felt as if she was finally walking toward a missing piece of her soul. A receptionist led them to a back office lined with aging cabinets. Harper held her breath as boxes were pulled down and opened. Dust floated through the air like ghosts awakened. Then there it was. A file with Harper's birth year, dates, and coded identification. Inside were handwritten notes. Mother, unidentified female, early 20s. Delivery complications. Child taken into confidential protection immediately. Harper placed her hand over her mouth, shaking, not just from pain but from relief. She existed. She was real. She wasn't a burden. She wasn't a mistake. At the bottom of the file, folded between medical notes, was a tiny sealed envelope. The archivist stepped back. We never open sealed personal artifacts. Only the biological parent or child may do so. Harper's lungs froze. Her hands trembled as she tore the seal slowly. Inside, a photograph. A young woman, about 22, with soft brown skin, tired eyes, and a hospital gown, holding a tiny newborn wrapped in a white blanket, tears on her cheeks. Behind the photo, a small handwritten note. Her name is not a secret. It is my greatest love. Please, when she grows, tell her that I never abandoned her. I fought for her. M. Harper collapsed into tears and Ray caught her before she hit the floor. Her mother fought for her. Her mother loved her. Her mother never let go. And someone else made sure she never learned that. That moment did not heal her. It ignited her. New York would not remain silent. Harper would not be erased again. Something powerful was coming. And someone powerful was about to be exposed. The morning after their discovery felt heavier than the New York winter clouds outside. Harper sat at the small kitchen table, staring at the photograph she now guarded like treasure. Her mother's tired smile was forever frozen in time, yet it was filled with more love than Harper had felt in all her years of loneliness. Every tear she shed now wasn't just grief, it was understanding, it was healing, it was a vow. Ray paced the living room in silence. His expensive watch glimmered as he ran his fingers nervously through his hair. A storm was brewing inside him. Harper could feel the anger, guilt, and disbelief radiating from him like heat off pavement. Finally she spoke. You look like you want to break something. His jaw clenched. I do. She placed the photograph gently on the table, forcing him to face her. You can help me, but don't let revenge become your purpose. I didn't come for war, Ray. I came for truth. His eyes softened, but only slightly. Truth doesn't always win quietly. Before Harper had a chance to respond, Ray's phone vibrated on the counter, a call from an unknown private number. He answered cautiously. A deep, familiar voice echoed through the receiver. Raymond, I hear you're digging into the past. Ray froze. Harper felt her heart stop. She recognized the tone instantly. It was the voice of a man who wasn't questioning, he was warning. Ray took a slow breath. And who exactly is telling you that? The voice chuckled softly. Son, you forget who built the walls you walk in. Ray's eyes went dark. It was his uncle, Gerald Harrington, a man whose influence stretched across politics, real estate, and private corporations. A man whose decisions were law within the family, silent, unchallengeable, final. Ray had once admired him. Now suspicion poisoned every memory. We should talk, Gerald continued. In person. Tonight. Ray ended the call without agreeing, but they both knew it wasn't a request. Ray sat down, slowly, almost mechanically. Harper whispered, Was that him? He nodded. Yes. The man who handled the family's private affairs. The one who always warned me to stay clean and focused on legacy. The one who knew my parents' weaknesses and mine. A sudden realization washed across his face, like a brutal wave slamming into shore. My uncle always discouraged me from relationships when I was younger. I thought he was protecting my image. But what if he was protecting his own plan? Harper frowned. What plan? Ray looked away, voice lower. To make me the perfect heir, untouched by scandal or responsibility outside the family vision. Harper's face went pale. So when he found out your girlfriend was pregnant? Ray blurted out, bitterness thick. He must have seen her as a threat, not a person. The room grew painfully still. That evening, Gerald sent a driver with a black sedan, tinted windows, and a message that said only, no public places. Leave phones. Harper wanted to go, but Ray insisted she stay behind, hidden for safety. She argued. He refused. This man operates in shadows, Ray said. If he even suspects you're close to exposing him, he'll move faster than we can. Harper grabbed his arm. What if he hurts you? Ray finally touched her cheek, gently, like something fragile he wished he'd known how to handle years ago. "This time I won't be silent." He left, and Harper prayed. The meeting place wasn't a formal office. It was an abandoned family estate in Westchester, long unused but still protected like a museum of ghosts. Chandeliers still hung, couches covered with white sheets, and the fireplace was lit as though someone had been waiting. Gerald stood there, dressed in an immaculate charcoal coat, not aging in appearance, only in cruelty. "You shouldn't have reopened this," he said, not bothering with a greeting. Ray stepped forward. "You hid my child." Gerald didn't flinch. "Your child was a threat to everything your family built." Ray's voice sharpened. "She was mine." Gerald walked closer, slow and controlled like a courtroom predator. "You were 22. Emotional. Reckless. Falling for someone who didn't match your world. You would have destroyed everything: the family name, business inheritance, global partnerships." Ray's eyes blazed. "That child lost her mother. Do you understand what you did?" Gerald's face remained stone. "I did what protected the empire. Weakness is expensive. Sympathy is a liability." Ray felt sick. Gerald added almost casually, "And if you continue, that child will learn that truth cuts deeper than lies ever did." It was a threat, clean, polished, deadly. Ray stepped forward. "I'm done living by rules written in fear." Gerald smirked. "You think you can win? Without my endorsements, connections, and credibility, you will have no legacy worth inheriting." Ray answered with steel in his voice. "Then I'll build a different one." Gerald paused, surprised but only for a second. "Your choice will cost you everything," he warned. Ray replied, "It already did." Back at the apartment, Harper sat reading her mother's note for the 20th time. She traced each letter with her fingertips like a child memorizing a lullaby. Suddenly, a knock. She froze. No one was expected. No one knew where they were, except Ray and Gerald. The knocking grew louder, more urgent. Harper's heart pounded. She stepped back, grabbing the closest object, a small lamp. Another knock, harder. Then a voice. "Harper, it's me. I need you to open the door." But it wasn't Ray. And she wasn't sure if it was friend or enemy. The knocking didn't stop. It grew more impatient, almost urgent, each strike against the door echoing through the small apartment like a pulse of dread. Harper swallowed, her throat dry, her fingers tightening around the lamp she held like a makeshift weapon. Her breath came slow and shaky as she stepped backward toward the hallway wall. Again the voice came, lower, controlled and tense. "Harper, open up. We need to talk." Her heart slammed against her ribs. The voice sounded familiar, but shadowed. She didn't reply. Instead, she moved quietly toward the peephole and pressed her eye to the tiny glass. A man in his early 40s stood on the other side, wearing a dark coat, hair slicked back, jaw tight with worry or frustration. She couldn't tell. He didn't seem like a random stranger, and he didn't look like someone sent to scare her. There was something in his stance, anxious, conflicted, determined, that made her pause. She whispered through the door, voice trembling. "Who are you?" He let out a shaky breath. "My name is Caleb Rowan. I knew your mother." Harper's entire body turned to ice. She hesitated. Her instincts screamed caution, but her curiosity hit with equal force. She stepped back, still gripping the lamp. "I'm not opening the door," she said firmly. "That's fine," he replied. "You don't have to. I just need you to listen." The hallway outside grew quiet, until he continued. "I worked at the maternity home where you were born." Harper froze, every muscle locked. Her voice cracked. "You're lying." "No," he said softly. "That place wasn't just a maternity home. It was a transaction center for wealthy families who wanted discretion." Harper felt nausea under her ribs. She leaned slowly against the wall, willing her knees not to give out. "What do you want?" she whispered. "To tell you something before others reach you first," he answered. "There are things your father doesn't know, things that could destroy more than reputations." For a moment, silence filled the space between them like smoke. Harper finally asked, barely audible, "How did you find me?" He sighed. "I wasn't the only one who kept records." Before Harper could reply, her cell phone, resting on the kitchen counter, buzzed loudly. She rushed over and saw Ray's name. She answered in a whisper. "Ray, someone's at the door. He says he knew my mother." Ray didn't let her finish. "Harper, don't open the door. I'm on my way. Stay inside, stay quiet, and don't trust anyone. My uncle isn't the only person involved." She whispered back in panic. "Ray, he knows where I was born. He said he worked there." Ray cursed under his breath. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. Don't talk to him again. Don't answer. Don't." The line cut out. Harper stared at the phone as the screen went dark. No signal. Her heart dropped. Was it coincidence or interference? She slowly stepped closer to the door again. "Harper," Caleb called softly as if sensing her return, "I know you're scared. I would be too. But what happened wasn't accidental, and it wasn't just about class or image." Harper pressed her forehead to the door and whispered, "Then what was it?" Caleb hesitated long enough to make her pulse race faster. "There were 2 signatures involved in your case," he finally said. "Not one." Harper's breathing stilled. "Your father's uncle wasn't working alone," Caleb continued. "Someone else, someone younger, signed off to ensure the separation was permanent." The hallway light flickered. Harper didn't move. "Who?" she whispered. Caleb exhaled like he'd been holding the truth for years. "Not a relative," he said. "Someone close to your mother, someone she trusted." The moment those words hit, Harper felt the floor tilt. Her mother didn't just lose a child, she was betrayed. Caleb's voice softened. "There were rumors inside the facility that your mother confided in someone who promised to help her escape the plan. But when the moment came, that person delivered her location to those in power." Harper's jaw trembled. "Why would someone do that?" "Fear," Caleb answered. "Or money. Or influence. Sometimes, love." Harper felt tears rising. She didn't know which answer hurt more. He continued slowly. "Your mother begged to keep you. She fought even while weak with complications. They sedated her without consent so they could take you quietly." Harper's knees finally buckled and she sank to the floor, hand over her mouth, tears streaming silently. She had imagined pain, but not this. Not betrayal. Not sedation. Not stolen motherhood. Outside the door, Caleb spoke one last time, voice breaking like someone who carried ghosts. "You deserve to know everything. When you're ready. I have documents, photos, and one name." Harper lifted her head. A name. Before she could respond, she heard something else. Footsteps rushing up the stairs. Heavy, fast, determined. Caleb stepped back, whispering urgently, "That's not me. I have to go. You'll see me again." Then silence. Harper scrambled to her feet, peering through the peephole. Caleb was gone. The footsteps were closer now, turning the corner. Harper backed away, gripping the lamp again. And then, someone tried the handle. It turned halfway. Someone was trying to get in. The door shook once, then again harder. Harper's heart raced. She didn't speak. She didn't breathe. Then a familiar voice whispered through the door, strained, breathless. "Harper, open up. It's me." She froze. Sounded like Ray. But something in his voice was off. Was it panic? Or was it someone pretending? The handle turned again. And Harper realized. She had no proof who was on the other side. Harper stood frozen in the middle of the dim apartment, gripping the lamp so tightly her fingers ached. The voice behind the door sounded like Ray, same tone, same pace, but fear has a way of twisting sound. The air felt thick, heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The handle jiggled one more time. "Harper, why aren't you answering?" the voice asked, sounding slightly breathless. She didn't move. "Say something only Ray would say," she demanded, her voice trembling. Pause. Then the voice answered, "You told me you didn't want revenge, only truth." Her knees nearly gave out. He had said that, but she wouldn't gamble her life on a sentence anyone could have overheard. She swallowed hard. "One more," she whispered. Silence hovered for a long moment. Then the voice answered quietly, "You said you were afraid his world would hate you." Her eyes filled with tears. That was real. That was theirs. She dropped the lamp and rushed to unlock the door, her hands shaking so badly she barely turned the latch, and opened it. Ray stood there, chest rising rapidly as if he'd sprinted up multiple flights. His eyes scanned her face instantly. "Are you hurt?" he asked, grabbing her shoulders. "No, but someone came here," she said, breathless. "A man named Caleb Rowan. He knew my mother, he worked at the place I was born." "Ray," he said. Ray stepped inside quickly, shutting the door with force and locking it. "Did you let him in?" "No," she said, wiping her face. "But he knew things, Ray, things no random person would know." Ray ran a hand through his hair. "Harper, listen to me. This is bigger than I thought. My uncle wasn't acting alone. There are still people tied to whatever happened back then, people who don't want the truth resurfacing." She shook her head slowly, her voice cracking. "So what do we do?" He took a deep breath, his voice low but steady. "We find proof before they erase it again." As Ray checked the locks again, Harper's phone buzzed on the counter, this time with an incoming text. She picked it up with caution. The message was from an unknown number. "I wasn't able to finish. They're watching, but you deserve everything. When it's safe, I'll contact you. CR." Harper whispered, "It's him." Ray took one look and nodded, not in fear but conviction. He knows he's being tracked. That means he's real, and he's scared. Harper closed her eyes. "So who do we trust?" Ray hesitated. "I don't know yet." The strategy shift. Ray began pacing, thinking aloud. "My uncle didn't intimidate me for digging, he warned me because he knows if you get public attention he loses control. His power has always depended on silence and paperwork hidden behind confidentiality agreements." Harper sat slowly on the couch, processing each piece like jagged glass. "So we break the silence," she whispered. Ray turned toward her. "Not with claims, with irrefutable evidence. And if Caleb has what he says, we need to get to him before they do." Harper nodded, wiping away tears she didn't remember shedding. "Where do we start?" Ray leaned against the wall, thinking. "There's one person who might know how the records were hidden," he said. "Someone who used to work for my uncle but quit without explanation. A former legal assistant named Dana Carver. She disappeared from the corporate world but resurfaced in nonprofit advocacy. She helps victims of institutional cover-ups." Harper's eyes widened. "Do you think she knows what happened?" Ray nodded slowly. "If anyone does, it's her." Before leaving the apartment, Harper stopped Ray with a hand on his arm. "Ray, why are you still helping me? You could walk away from this and keep your life clean. Why stay?" His eyes softened, not out of pity but something deeper, something slowly awakening. "Because I lost you once without knowing," he said. "This time, I choose you." Her breath caught in her chest. Not love, not yet, but responsibility mixed with something that might grow into more. They packed quickly and quietly, leaving the apartment through the rear stairwell instead of the front. Ray didn't want to risk cameras or eyes in the building lobby. Outside, a cold wind brushed Harper's face, carrying the smell of rain and city steam. They walked several blocks before calling a rideshare, paying in cash and giving an alternate drop-off location. Ray stayed alert, scanning reflections in shop windows for anyone following. Harper watched him silently, seeing not a billionaire but a man fighting ghosts with bare hands. A quick search found that Dana volunteered evenings at a community center in Lower Manhattan, counseling young adults who aged out of foster care. Harper's voice shook when she read it out loud. "She works with kids like me." Ray nodded. That's why she left. She didn't want to be part of secrets anymore. As they headed toward the center, the rain finally began, light at first, then heavier. City lights blurred into silver streaks across the car windows. Harper stared outside, whispering to herself, "Mom, this time I'm not running." When they arrived, Ray paid and stepped out first, scanning the street. Harper followed closely, pulling her hood up as rain mixed with her breath. The community center glowed with warm yellow lights, laughter and voices drifting out. It felt safe, human, real. But right before they reached the door, Ray paused. Harper looked up. He wasn't staring at the entrance. He was staring across the street, jaw tightening. A black sedan was parked there. Engine running. Windows tinted. Just like earlier. Harper whispered, "Is that them?" Ray didn't answer. He placed his hand gently but firmly on the small of her back and whispered one word. "Stay close." They stepped through the community center door, unaware that the sedan door opened slowly behind them, and someone stepped out into the rain. The courtroom felt colder than ever that morning. The hum of quiet conversations, the shuffling of feet, and the heavy anticipation seemed to sit on everyone's shoulders like invisible weights. I sat pressed between my mother and my brother Isaiah, my palms shaking, my heartbeat unable to settle into any rhythm that felt normal. Today wasn't just another hearing. Today we were going to hear the ruling, and also see the one person I prayed and feared would show up. Mr. Kingston. He still hadn't returned any of our calls. His lawyers said they couldn't reach him either. I didn't know how to feel, abandoned, betrayed, disappointed, or if I still believed in him the way my heart foolishly did. My mother leaned over and whispered, "No matter what happens, you're still my miracle. Don't forget that." I nodded, but inside I was barely holding myself together. The judge entered and everyone stood. My breath trembled as the case was called, and my mother's attorney began giving final statements about my medical situation, my academic success despite the struggle, and the environment we fought to survive in. Then the opposing lawyer stood, tall, polished, and arrogant. He spoke like everything was just paperwork, like my life was some irrelevant detail that clogged his busy day. When the judge asked if Mr. Kingston was present or represented, his seat remained empty. My chest cracked. My eyes burned. My throat tightened so hard I could barely breathe. He promised. The judge sighed heavily and began preparing to make the final ruling, until the doors suddenly slammed open. Everyone turned. And there he was. Not in a suit. Not with his usual calm arrogance. But breathless, disheveled, sweating, and emotionally shattered, like a man who had been running through storms no one else could see. "Your Honor, please," he gasped. "I'm here." My mother's hand covered her mouth. Isaiah froze. I felt myself stand without even realizing. Mr. Kingston looked across the courtroom directly at me, eyes red and shining, and for the first time since I had known him, he didn't look like a billionaire or a businessman. He looked like a father terrified of losing his child. "I'm sorry," he whispered hoarsely. The judge nodded for him to speak, and with a trembling voice, he confessed everything. How he had run out of fear, how he doubted whether I would ever want him as a father, how he couldn't live with the guilt of abandoning me again, and how, when he finally gathered the courage to come back, he found my name trending on social media because of the case. "I am not too late, am I?" he asked, voice cracking. Everyone in the room held their breath. Even the opposing lawyer looked shaken. Silence stretched long enough for my heartbeat to echo in my ears. I didn't trust my voice, so I walked toward him, slow and trembling. When I finally stood right in front of him, I whispered, "You left, but you came back. That matters." His tears finally fell, and I stepped forward, into his arms. The courtroom faded. The judge paused, and for the first time in my life, I felt whole. As I stood in Mr. Kingston's arms, I felt his chest trembling, not from exhaustion but from fear. Fear of losing something money could never replace. The judge gently cleared his throat, reminding everyone that emotions were welcome, but decisions still had to be made. We returned to our seats, though now I sat between my mother and Mr. Kingston, an arrangement that made the entire courtroom murmur. The judge began slowly. "Today's case is not simply about financial assistance or parental obligation. It is about responsibility, history, emotional trauma, and a young girl's right to stability." My fingers curled around my knees, bracing myself. "Mr. Kingston, while we acknowledge your recent appearance and declaration, the court also cannot ignore that you disappeared during critical moments. Fatherhood is not an event, it is a consistent presence." His head lowered, ashamed. I swallowed hard, not wanting to lose him, not wanting to hurt Mom, not wanting the world to dictate what family should look like. Just as the judge lifted the final sheet, ready to read the ruling officially, the door opened again, this time quietly, and enrolled a medical gurney. People gasped. A woman, pale and fragile, covered in medical tubes and wrapped in hospital blankets, was being wheeled in by a nurse and two orderlies. Her face was thin, almost hollow, yet painfully familiar. Mr. Kingston jumped to his feet, stunned. Elizabeth? My breath vanished. My vision blurred. My heart nearly stopped. That was his wife. The woman I assumed didn't want me. The woman whose silence I interpreted as rejection. The woman everyone assumed hated my existence. She weakly signaled that she wanted to speak. The judge allowed it. The nurse lifted a microphone to her lips. With a trembling, sick voice, she whispered, "I never abandoned you. I begged him to find you. I wanted you. I prayed for you. I left letters, every birthday, but they were never delivered." A heavy gasp rippled across the courtroom, including from the judge. She continued, "My sickness, it got worse. I didn't want you to watch me die. I didn't want your first memory of me to be a hospital bed like it was for me and my mother. So I asked him to wait, but he waited too long." Tears ran down my face nonstop. Mom closed her eyes and a single tear slid down her cheek, not out of jealousy but out of understanding. Mr. Kingston broke, sobbing silently, holding his head. Then Elizabeth raised her hand toward me and whispered, "You deserve all of us, not pieces. Please let him be your father. And if I don't survive, let my last piece be knowing you were loved fully." At that moment, the judge put down the papers and took off his glasses, visibly shaken, voice softer than ever. "No ruling today. This is no longer a legal matter. This is a family matter. Court is adjourned." Just like that, everything changed. No verdict. No winners. No losers. Only truth. Only choice. As everyone began to leave, Elizabeth looked at me with a faint smile. "Can I hold your hand?" I walked to her without hesitation, and the warmth of her weak fingers felt like a lifetime restored. I spent the rest of that afternoon in a silent storm, standing somewhere between two worlds that both claimed to love me, but neither had shared a complete truth. My heart was tired, my mind even more. Outside the courthouse, a gentle wind swept across the steps as cameras flashed and reporters shouted unanswered questions. Security helped create a path as Mr. Kingston supported his wife's gurney toward a waiting medical van. Mom stood a few feet behind me, holding her purse close to her chest the same way she held her worries. I didn't know whether to walk toward the billionaire and the woman who shared my blood, or toward the woman who sacrificed her dreams to raise me alone. Instead, I stood still, frozen, forcing air into my lungs. When the medical van doors closed, Elizabeth locked eyes with me through the small back window. Her expression wasn't desperate, it was hopeful. Like she believed I would figure out the path, even if it wasn't immediate. Then the van drove away. The world around me became too loud, too curious, too intrusive. Mom whispered, "Let's go somewhere quiet," and gently touched my shoulder. We got into a taxi and headed toward a small lakeside park near Silverwood Lake, a place Mom used to take me when she wanted to talk about difficult things without walls listening and memories echoing. The sky was a soft gray, the kind that makes every color appear heavier, deeper. Ducks floated lazily near the bank while joggers passed with headphones, unaware that the quiet girl on the bench was living a chapter she'd never forget. Mom handed me a warm paper cup of hot chocolate and said softly, "You don't have to decide anything today." But I shook my head. "I do," I whispered, staring at the lake. "Everyone keeps saying it's about what's fair, what's right, what's deserved. But no one asked me what I feel." She nodded slowly. "Then say it out loud. Even if it hurts." I closed my eyes. "I don't want to lose you," I breathed. "I don't want to lose them either." Mom looked down at her hands, hands that worked late shifts, hands that wiped tears without complaint, hands that cooked on empty pockets and prayed over sleeping dreams. Those hands had never failed me. "I'm not going anywhere," she said gently. Silence returned, not awkward, just full. Then she inhaled deep, as if preparing for something she'd been storing inside for years. "There's something I never told you," she said quietly. My heartbeat stumbled. She turned so her eyes met mine, not as a mother hiding truths, but as a woman ready to reveal a burden. "When I found out I was expecting you, I knew life would not be easy. But what scared me most wasn't loneliness, it was losing you. His family was powerful, influential, and I was convinced they might take you away if they ever knew. I stared, unable to blink. She continued, voice slightly breaking, I didn't run to punish him. I ran because I was afraid they would claim you, shape you, and erase the parts of you that came from me. Tears filled my eyes, not from anger but from the painful complexity of love. So you protected me by disappearing? I whispered. She nodded. I didn't realize that protecting you meant injuring your identity. For the first time, I saw her fear not from the view of a child, but as a young mother who faced an impossible choice. Before I could respond, my phone vibrated. A text message blinked on the screen. Unknown number, she wants to see you. Tonight. Room 318, Cedarview Medical Center. I stared at it for nearly a full minute. Mom leaned closer. You can go if you want to. I swallowed hard. What if it makes everything harder? It might, she said honestly. But clarity requires courage. I nodded, wiped my face and whispered, will you come with me? Mom smiled, small, tired but real. Always. We reached Cedarview Medical Center around 7:40 p.m. The building smelled like disinfectant and sorrow, the same scent that made my chest tighten whenever someone mentioned hospitals. The hall lights flickered slightly as if the building was tired too. A nurse guided us to room 318. My palms were sweating. My shoes suddenly felt too loud. My heart felt like a countdown clock. Inside, Elizabeth lay propped up by pillows, monitors softly beeping beside her. She was weaker than in court, but her eyes were brighter, as though hope itself was medicine. Mr. Kingston sat beside her holding a notebook, one filled with folded letters all addressed to me. He stood when I entered, voice low and thick with emotion. These are the letters your mother wrote every year, he said, his voice cracking slightly. I found them, hidden inside a safe I never checked until the truth forced me to. Elizabeth extended her hand slightly, motioning for me to come near. I walked slowly, afraid the moment might shatter if I moved too quickly. She whispered, I don't know how much time I have left, so listen carefully. The room froze. If you choose to stay with your mother, I will understand. If you choose to live with us, I will not see it as betrayal. And if you choose to have both, even imperfectly, that would be my greatest healing. My throat tightened. No matter where you sleep, carry your future, not our mistakes, she finished. Tears felt heavy as they slid down. Then she gently pushed a small bracelet toward me, silver with a tiny engraved initial. It was meant for your first birthday, she whispered. I held it in my palm, feeling its cold metal warm against my skin. Before the tears fully fell, she offered one final sentence, the one that would echo inside me. You are not torn between families. You are the bridge that connects what once was broken. And just like that, the weight of choosing shifted from punishment to possibility. But that didn't mean the answer would be easy. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not without consequence. As we left her room, I turned back for one final glance. She smiled faintly and mouthed, Live, don't fear. The elevator doors closed, leaving me with the heaviest question I had ever faced, and no instructions. That night, sleep refused to come anywhere near me. Even after getting home, my mind replayed every detail from the hospital room. The letters, the bracelet, her fading voice, and the look in her eyes that spoke louder than any spoken word. I paced my bedroom floor until the moon shifted from one side of my window to the other. Every thought created a new question, every memory created a new fear. Around 3:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. At first, I ignored it, thinking it was another random late-night notification. But then it buzzed again. And again. When I finally checked, 3 messages waited. 1. From Mr. Kingston. She's asking for you again. It's urgent. 2. From an unknown number. Hurry. She keeps saying your name. 3. From the hospital system. Patient condition update requested. Immediate family contact recommended. My chest tightened. Urgent. Hurry. Immediate. Everything pointed to now, not later. Mom was already half awake when I rushed into her room. Something happened? she asked, sitting up. I nodded, voice trembling. We need to go. Within minutes, we were back in a rideshare heading towards Cedarview Medical Center. The streets were nearly empty, streetlights blinking like blinking warning signals from the universe. The hospital hallways felt colder this time, quieter, darker, like they were holding secrets behind every door. When we reached room 318, the door wasn't fully closed. Soft crying leaked through the small opening. Inside, the lights were dimmed. Elizabeth lay on her bed, oxygen mask on, her chest rising and falling with weak, uneven breaths. 2 nurses and a physician stood nearby. Mr. Kingston sat inches from her, with both hands wrapped around hers, whispering words only love or regret could form. He looked up as we entered, desperation written across his face. She keeps trying to speak but can't, he whispered. I walked closer, unable to breathe properly. I stood on her right side, gently touching her arm. Her eyelids fluttered and she tried to focus on me. Even in such weakness, she found a way to smile, faint, fragile, but full of meaning. Mom stood behind me silently. In her eyes I saw pain, but also grace. No resentment. No anger. Just humanity. Elizabeth lifted her hand slightly, motioning she wanted to write. The nurse slid a clipboard and pen under her fingers, stabilizing her wrist. It took her several attempts, each stroke slow and shaky, but she didn't stop. When she finished, she pointed for the page to be given to me, not anyone else. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the sheet, expecting a goodbye message, a confession, or some kind of instructions. But it wasn't just a message. It was a contract. A legal amendment prepared earlier. It stated that I, not her husband, not her family, not her attorneys, would have final authority over where I chose to live, which last name I wanted to carry, which family identity I accepted, and how future inheritance decisions relating to me would be finalized, including education, trust funds, properties, and business ties. It was signed by her earlier that day, witnessed by 2 legal nurses, and stamped. I froze. She wasn't asking me to choose a parent. She was giving me the power to choose my future. Tears blurred the page while she tapped her chest twice as if saying, "From my heart, this is for you." I leaned down, whispering, "I don't hate you. I just wish I didn't miss so much." A tear escaped her eye as she mouthed 2 words behind the mask. Forgive life. Not forgive her. Not forgive him. But forgive life, for being unfair, unpredictable, and unpreventable. A soft alarm beeped on one of the monitors. The nurse adjusted something quickly, voice low but calm, vital signs dropping. Mr. Kingston began sobbing quietly, still holding her hand as if his grip alone could anchor her soul to earth. The doctor stepped out to give us a moment, closing the curtain around the bed. The world became smaller, quieter, sacred. Elizabeth removed the oxygen mask herself, against medical instruction, because she wanted her last audible breath to be spoken, not assisted. I bent close, my forehead nearly touching hers. She whispered, barely audible, "Promise me, you'll live, not choose." Her eyes drifted upward. Her body relaxed. And the last breath left her without struggle. A soft, continuous beep filled the silence. No one spoke. No one moved. The world held still. Mr. Kingston let out a sound so broken it didn't resemble a cry, more like the sound of a man whose entire soul cracked open. Mom gently wrapped her arms around me from behind, as if anchoring me to gravity. For minutes time had no meaning. Finally, a nurse whispered, "We're so sorry," and placed a white sheet slowly over Elizabeth's still body. Before the sheet fully covered her face, I touched her hand one last time and whispered, "I'll carry love, not blame." And for the first time in my life I felt like both families were real, not separated by choices but connected by truth. As dawn rose over Cedarview, hospital workers wheeled her body away for final arrangements. The doctor handed me a sealed envelope with my name on it, found inside Elizabeth's personal bag. Outside, the sky shifted into soft orange and pink hues. A new day but not the same world. Mr. Kingston stopped beside me, eyes red and voice cracked. "There's something I need to tell you," he whispered, holding back another tear. "And it can't wait." My heart paused mid-beat. Something new. something hidden, something that could change everything again. I followed Mr. Kingston outside the hospital into the early morning light, where the sun hadn't fully risen but the sky was no longer dark. The world looked suspended, like it hadn't decided yet whether it wanted to continue or rewind. Cars passed normally, people lived normally, but my world felt cracked open, held together only by breath and hope. We walked toward a quiet seating area near the medical garden, where a gentle water fountain created the illusion of calm. Mom trailed behind slowly, giving us space but refusing to disappear. She sat a short distance away, close enough to hear if needed, far enough for privacy. Mr. Kingston rubbed his eyes, unable to control the tremors in his hands. This wasn't the powerful billionaire the world worshipped. This was a grieving man who'd lost time, love, and now the chance to repair things perfectly. "I've spent years believing I knew the whole story," he said, voice low. "But I didn't." I remained quiet, not from anger but from the fear that whatever he was about to say might rewrite everything again. He took a deep breath. "There's someone else involved. Someone who should have told me the truth long before lawyers, long before assumptions, and long before it became too late." He paused, fighting for composure, then added, "It was my mother." I blinked slowly, expecting any other answer. A business partner, a personal assistant, a lawyer, even an enemy, but not his own mother, my grandmother by blood. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice cracking. "You were never supposed to be hidden from me. When I first tried to contact your mother years ago, my calls were blocked. Not by her, but by someone who believed she was protecting the name, the company, and our legacy." My heartbeat accelerated, disbelief mixing with anger. "She thought, someone like your mother, didn't fit the family image," he continued, ashamed. "She assumed she was a temporary chapter, not a lifelong one." Mom closed her eyes from across the garden bench, not surprised, only deeply wounded, as though she had always suspected but never confirmed. "But that's not all," he whispered. "She managed a legal contact point behind my back. She intercepted letters, not just the ones you saw today, but letters I wrote too." I stared stunned. Every unanswered message. Every silence that felt like rejection. Every birthday when I waited. Every holiday when I prayed. It wasn't one parent abandoning the other. It was someone rewriting destiny without permission. He looked at me again, eyes flooded with guilt. "You weren't unwanted. You were filtered out." A tear slid down my cheek without warning. "But why didn't you fight harder?" I finally whispered, the hurt rising like a wave. "Why didn't you come find me yourself?" He didn't get defensive. He didn't raise his voice. He just let the truth break open. "I tried, but not enough," he admitted. "At first I believed what I was told, that your mother didn't want contact. Later, I convinced myself you'd be better off without our complicated world. And eventually, shame replaced courage." Hearing him confess was more painful than if he'd lied. Silence spread between us, heavy but necessary. Then he continued with something far more unsettling. "My mother may have acted alone at first, but eventually someone else helped her. Someone who benefited from keeping you a secret." His voice dropped. "My brother." A chill ran up my spine. He explained that his brother, influential in the family company, feared that my existence could alter inheritance structures, company leadership succession, and public reputation. With my identity undisclosed, control remained clear and unchallenged for him. And then the final blow. "They plan to reveal you after Elizabeth's passing, to use you as a public gesture of charity and emotional rebranding for the family name." My stomach twisted. I wasn't just hidden, I was taunted. I stood up, unable to sit any longer, pacing a few steps away. The wind felt colder. My mind couldn't sort anger from heartbreak. Every thought felt like it shattered the next. Mom walked toward me slowly, placing a gentle hand on my back. "You are not a strategy," she whispered. "You are not a headline." I wiped my tears and turned back to Mr. Kingston. "Does your mother know that you know?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not yet. Today, after the funeral arrangements. I'm confronting her." His voice steadied. "And I want you there." My breath caught. At first, I assumed he wanted me to prove something or to act as evidence, but then he clarified. Not to defend me, not to fight her, but to reclaim what is yours. He then placed a small leather-bound journal in my hands. This belonged to Elizabeth, he said. She wrote in it mostly at night when she couldn't sleep. She intended to give it to you when you were old enough. My fingers hovered over the cover, not ready to open it, but unable to let it go. He looked at me with a mixture of sorrow and hope. You deserve truth before you choose your future. I nodded slowly, breathing through the emotion clogging my voice. I'll come, I whispered, but not as a business interest, and not as a problem to solve. He nodded firmly. As my daughter, he said. Mom slipped her fingers into mine, holding on without fear, not competing, not shrinking, not surrendering, but standing with me. And as the first full beam of sunlight touched the hospital windows behind us, I realized the next chapter wouldn't be about pain. It would be about confrontation, identity, and power, without bitterness. But the question that haunted me remained. What if the truth I heard today is still not the full truth? Because secrets rarely come alone. And deep down, I felt there was one final revelation waiting, one that would reshape everything again. 2 days later, the world seemed strangely quiet, as if life itself paused to listen. Elizabeth's funeral was scheduled early that morning at Rosebridge Memorial Chapel, a timeless red-brick church resting on a gentle hill overlooking Lake Hilburn. A light drizzle fell, the kind that settles on skin like cold teardrops from the sky. Inside, the chapel was filled with white lilies, her favorite flower, symbolizing purity and peace. A soft piano version of "You Are Loved, Don't Give Up" echoed gently through the room. People wore black, but their expressions varied: guilt, sorrow, regret, reflection. I sat between Mom and Mr. Kingston near the front, clutching the silver bracelet she had given me. The pastor spoke about grace, unfinished stories, and the quiet heroes in life no one sees. He reminded everyone that the end of a life is not the end of its influence. After the service, guests formed a circle outside, while her casket was lowered beneath a maple tree whose leaves were turning red, as if the tree itself was offering flowers. Mr. Kingston whispered a trembling goodbye into the air, then kissed the top of the casket. Mom set down a small white rose. I placed the bracelet on top of it, not to leave it behind, but as a sign that I would carry her heart, not her wounds. When it was done, Mr. Kingston turned to me with steady determination. Are you ready? I wasn't, but I nodded. Because some chapters must be closed face to face, not from distance. The confrontation. We drove in silence through the gated entrance of the Kingston family estate, an enormous mansion in Greenwood Heights, surrounded by iron fencing, stone lions, and manicured gardens that looked too perfect to be real. Inside, the air smelled of lavender polish and money, but beneath it, fear lingered like a hidden scent only truth could detect. We were escorted to a private sitting room. Moments later, she entered, the woman whose decisions shaped our lives without permission. His mother, Mrs. Kingston. Her posture was elegant, chin lifted, pearls perfectly placed. A woman trained to rule her world even when that world crumbled. She didn't greet us. Her eyes only studied me, searching for any resemblance to the legacy she guarded. Mr. Kingston broke the silence. Mother, we know everything. Her expression hardly shifted, but her fingers tightened slightly around her cane. You think you know, she replied calmly, but what you understand is far less. He stepped forward. You hid my child from me. You intercepted letters. You manipulated contact. Why? She inhaled slowly as if preparing a lecture, not a confession. I protected you, she stated firmly. Our family built its reputation over 3 generations. You were on the path to becoming the youngest CEO in our entire lineage. And then she glanced briefly at Mom, came into your life. A young woman with no status, no influence, and no guarantee of stability. Mom's eyes glistened, but she did not flinch. You judged her, I said softly. She looked at me then, really looked as if she finally realized the person standing before her wasn't a rumor, but flesh and soul. I judged circumstance, she answered. Not you. Then she revealed something none of us expected. She walked toward a cabinet, opened a locked drawer, and pulled out a faded manila envelope. Inside were photographs of me, as a baby, as a toddler, as a little girl on playground swings. Pictures that no one in that room had ever seen, not even my mother. "You think I wanted you erased?" she said quietly. "I wanted to watch you grow without disrupting your world or destroying his." My heartbeat hammered. "You followed my life?" I whispered. She nodded once. From a distance. Mr. Kingston looked stunned. Mom whispered, "Why didn't you help?" Her answer was fragile, not defensive, not cruel. "Because I didn't trust myself to protect you without controlling the outcome. Power can destroy love if mishandled, and I was afraid." For the first time, her voice cracked, barely but enough to reveal something real beneath the steel exterior. Then she looked directly at me. "I failed you, but I did love you. In the only way I knew how." Silence filled the room, complicated, painful, but honest. And then she turned to her son and said what no one expected. "She deserves a choice, not a claim." Without another word, she handed me a legal folder titled Options, Not Obligations. Inside were 3 sealed envelopes labeled Keycap 1 with your mother, Keycap 2 with your father, Keycap 3 shared new path. "Read them later," she said. "Not here. Not in front of us. Your future should be chosen in peace, not performance." I slowly nodded. Then she stepped closer and placed something small in my palm, a delicate gold ring with a tiny heart engraving. "It belonged to Elizabeth," she whispered. "She wore it before she met us. She wanted you to have something from her before the Kingston name ever mattered." I closed my hand around it, warmth blooming through my fingers. In that moment, I understood something deeper than any truth we had uncovered. Sometimes love fails not from absence, but from fear. That night, back home, I sat alone at my desk, 3 envelopes staring at me like 3 possible destinies. My chest rose and fell slowly as rain tapped softly against my window, a lullaby for decisions. I opened none of them. Instead, I reached for Elizabeth's journal, slowly flipping to the final page, where her handwriting was slightly uneven, tired, but remarkably clear. Read. "You were never meant to choose between homes. You were meant to create your own." My tears dropped onto the ink but didn't smudge it, because her words were permanent, and so was my answer. I picked up a pen and wrote one sentence on a blank page beneath it. "I choose a future where love isn't divided, it's shared, rebuilt, and redefined. Family isn't the one you're born into, nor the one the world approves of. It's the one you heal with, grow with, and refuse to give up on." And sometimes, the most powerful choice isn't choosing who to belong to, but choosing how to belong to yourself.